told you
to negotiate many times.
Negotiate? What is to negotiate? What is?
Well, the university is a public institution.
That's
it's an
right.
Important institution
but the university,
for all of its own community and for the community of Berkeley that live around it.
All of it began the first time some of you who know better and are old enough to know better let young people think that they had the right to choose the laws they would obey as long as they were doing it in the name of social protest.
I'm sick and tired of the argument about whether some effort to enforce law and order is going to escalate anything at all. Plain truth of the matter is this has to stop, and it has to stop like the day before yesterday. And it's going to be stopped whatever it takes.
I was picked a few days ago in California by some youngsters that had signs that said, "Make love, not war." Trouble is, they didn't look like they were capable of doing either.
That, ladies and gentlemen, is an example of leadership. Something we are sorely lacking in general today in this country, and specifically about what we're going to talk about. And it's exactly what then Governor Reagan was dealing with in that video. And that is the insanity that's taking place on our college campuses today, colleges, universities, aka indoctrination mills. Welcome to Your Leo Nation. I am the Chief Mark Garrett. Joining us again today is the producer, Anthony Jackson. Anthony, great to have you here today, sir.
Thank you for having me.
You know, it's this morning, my wife and I were having a conversation about this madness. And and I was thinking about doing a show on this the last few days with all the stuff going on. And I thought, I said, Michelle, I said, I'm going to call Anthony up and we're actually going to do this topic today. It is so impactful and so indicative of so many other issues happening in society today, in American society, really in Western culture in general, but speaking just about the United States of America right now. So many aspects, so many spokes on this wheel, Anthony, and really kind of what brought it to a head today for me, and when my wife and I were talking about it, was the fact that the University of Southern California has just canceled its commencement ceremonies for the graduating class 2024 coming up next month in May, and we're going to get into that. And I pulled an article up, and I know you had a chance to look at that as well. And we're going to dig deep into this situation at USC. I know USC very well. I worked across the street from USC for about 3 years as a lieutenant and a captain with the California Highway Patrol. Have a lot of interaction over the years with USC. But reading the article, watching the general news coverage of this madness across the country right now is disturbing, I think, is an understatement. And I know you had a chance to look at the article. I want to give it a chance to chime in there, my friend.
No, yeah, I've been watching, on the socials. I don't watch the mainstream media nowadays, but it's gotten pretty nuts. I've seen like a lot of I actually seen a student which unfortunate for her high school graduation was cut off from the pandemic that happened. And then her graduation from USC is now puts. And so she was like, expressing her anger towards that. And it's pretty messed up situation.
It's devastating. It's
Yeah.
absolutely devastating. And it's a great point you raise for these people 4 years ago, missing high school graduation. And we won't get into that whole topic, but
Yeah.
I found that disgusting as well.
Yeah.
And now 4 years later, you work hard. You play by the rules, apparently, probably with this young lady you're referring to. And because of not only a lack of leadership, but because of the behavior, the decisions that these administrators on college campuses have made, not just the last 4 years or 8 years, probably the last 50 years. now this young lady and many others like her are missing their chance to be honored in public by, family and friends. Um, when I was talking to my wife this morning, she made a great point. She said, talking about these 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 students, that are protesting, that are shutting down streets, shutting down campuses across the country, and that are protesting uh, in support of Palestine, and by the way, and countless numbers of them in direct, unabashed support of Hamas. Many of these people, I would say a large percentage, just leave it at that, are the same people that were flying the BLM flags a few years ago, 4 years ago, Black Lives Matter. And these are the same people that would get angry and shout people down who either carried a sign or said, all lives matter. Oh no, you're a racist if you say all lives matter. It's only Black lives that matter. If you say all lives matter, that must mean that you like white people, or white people are better, things like this. These are the same people. Make no mistake. If they're not the same individuals, they're certainly the same ideology. And this is an example of what happens when people start becoming unmoored from any set principles, from any real virtue, from things that you actually believe in that are objective and are fair. Pretty soon it all starts pitting one group against another. It all results in chaos. And this is what we're seeing right now. These universities have got themselves so tangled up in this crap. Now they have competing entities, and was political, financial. You have all of these different entities that are now at odds with one another. And by the way, we see the same thing happening at the presidential election, the presidential politics level. We see the same types of things happening. These splinter groups now. So, with that said, let me just dive into this article real quick from the LA Slimes, aka LA Times. It was April 25th, which as the recording today, that was yesterday by my mathematics skills. So USC announced that it's canceling its main May commencement ceremony, capping a dramatic series of moves that began last week after it informed valedictorian Osna Tabazem, who had been opposed by pro-Israel groups, that she would not be delivering the traditional speech. And we're going to talk about Miss Tabazem in a minute. In ending the university-wide May 10th graduation ceremony altogether, President Carol Folt, a woman of no leadership, we'll talk about her as well, aimed to quell the controversy that grew as the school chipped away at core parts of the ritual, drawing criticism from both pro-Palestinian and pro-Israeli activists. So what's happened here? Talked about it a minute ago in general terms, specifically multiculturalism. This started a long time ago, and I was opposed to the whole idea of teaching multiculturalism, DEI, which is much more recent introduction into our academic world, all the way from kindergarten up until graduate school. But all these things, when you start dividing, well, we have to honor every culture. By the way, except for Western culture, if you ever notice about multiculturalism going back, and multiculturalism, of course, it's almost antiquated now. It's hardly ever used anymore because DEI has absorbed all of this under its umbrella. Diversity, equity, inclusion. Of course, it's just like many things on the left. It's exactly opposite of what it purports to be. But multiculturalism, when you start celebrating every other culture other than your own, well, what happens? Of course, we start having splinter groups again. We start having this balkanization of our society, and there's no place more active in perpetuating these notions that Western culture, and specifically American culture, are evil, they are destructive, they're colonialist. There's no entity more involved in perpetuating this lie than academia. None. And now, as they say, the chickens are coming home to roost. Let me continue here. The cancellation took place amid unrest on university campuses across the nation, stemming from the Israel Hamas war. On Wednesday, at a pro Palestinian encampment at USC, 93 students and off campus activists were arrested. And, I've got friends in LAPD dealing with this stuff. And it, there's so much I want to get into. One of the things that I want to talk about, Anthony, you actually raised this before we got in the show, and I want you to go ahead and pose a question about the free speech issue. So I want to talk about that before we get into some of the nuts and bolts of this particular issue at USC.
Yeah, yeah, when we're talking on the phone, I was thinking this before we talked, that like some of the stuff you can you can agree with them or not, or disagree, right?
Mhm.
And that's what makes America. Like we agree to disagree, right? Um, and whatever issue that may be, we have the right to state our opinions and stuff like that. And so, you know, I'm thinking like, okay, they're doing the protests. Like, I was like wondering, is it too harsh on what they're doing to the protesters? And I wasn't really thinking about all the other chaos when I asked you that question. But because I see a lot of the feedback that's going on right now online is a lot of people, even on the far right, even are sticking up for the protesters, right? And it's kind of like it's all splintered up, like what you said. And so I'm kind of like thinking, I'm not there. I've never been a part of a riot or a protest, whatever it may be, but you have. So I had to ask you, what's your thoughts on how they're conducting these protests, and like, not necessarily where your position is, but just your position on as far as how they're conducting these protests on the campuses and stuff like that. Are they being too harsh to these protesters, or are they getting kind of what they deserve because of what they're essentially how they're going about it?
Well, when we had a conversation earlier, I thought it was such a great topic of discussion about free speech and what the limits are and things like this. And
Hmm.
this is why I played that video of Governor Reagan and how his position about such protests. And the reason I think it's such a great question is that people conflate, or people misunderstand. They don't understand the origin of the First Amendment, and where that right comes from. Now, again, I believe your right to free speech and free association those rights come from
Right.
God. I think
Hmm.
they're inalienable rights, but they're enforced by the government. Only the federal government or local government, however you want to say it, only government can enforce the protections of the First Amendment, and only the government can violate your First Amendment rights. This is so important for people to understand. Your First Amendment rights do not give you the authority or the right to infringe upon someone else's rights. For example, free association, the right to travel. So, i.e., the Golden Gate Bridge was shut down
Hmm.
last week. Your First Amendment rights do not supersede any other articulated rights in the Bill of Rights or any place else in the Constitution. This is so important for people to understand. A private citizen, a private entity cannot violate your free speech rights. If you sign up to be a member of any club or whatever, there are rules and regulations, and if you violate them through, let's just say, whatever words you're using that violate certain rules, you can be kicked out by that private entity. The government has nothing to do with that. Only the government can violate your free speech rights. Period. That's it. If someone wants to protest something where I live, they have no right to come on my front lawn or my driveway and block me or my family from leaving our house or entering our house. That's a violation of my property rights. I want people to understand this. Only the government can violate your free speech rights, your First Amendment rights. Number one, to understand. So let me give you an example. We have these, and I'm sorry, they're hoodlums. These are just muckrakers, these students that are impeding the progress, and I say progress, the academic progress of other people around them. They are impeding other people's rights to free associate, to go to and from safely, and a lot of a lot of times intimidate them to not use their own free speech rights. It's not a violation
Hmm.
of law, but it's intimidation. So if you happen to be in, let's say you're visiting your relative at the hospital, they got a broken leg, and you're in a hospital room sitting there talking to them, and all of a sudden you hear someone start screaming and walking down the hallway carrying a flag for whatever cause. You pick the cause, doesn't matter. And they're screaming about this or that, and they want everybody to abide by what they want to do. And you've got to vote this way or support that group or support this cause or, whatever it is, would that be okay? Scream it at the top of their lungs. How about this? In front of the front door of ER, say it's a medical emergency. You want to come in there. Do they have the right to just protest in front of that automatic door in front of ER? Maybe prevent the ambulance from bringing a patient. Huh? Do they not? Of course not. Of course not. The hospital staff would call law enforcement because these people are actually interfering with the business that they need to do. This is so important to understand. These so-called students have no right. They have no right to engage in behavior that impedes on the rights or the safety of other people in society. Period. Listen, when people want to protest, and happens all the time, often they get permits. Why? Because often they want to use a right of way, a surface street, a highway, whatever it is, other public lands, and they go and apply to the local entity for a permit. And by the way, it's not just true for protests. It can be for parades or for other, for-profit functions, a street fair, things like this. You go get a permit. Why do you have to get a permit? You have to get a permit because your activities are going to impede, obviously, on the ability, let's say in the case of the street, for someone to drive down a route they want to use. So you get a permit, so you can pay for, so you have to pay for, say, traffic control, security, maybe for the local government to announce to the public that this street's going to be closed for a few hours on this day. You have to use another route and things like this. That's that is why a permit is required, because your activity would affect somebody else. So your right does not supersede anybody else's right. I want people to understand that. Um,
Um,
Go ahead.
can I put a word in? No,
Yes.
I totally agree with you on that, and I think our current leaders in those states and stuff, you put it better than what they could. Like I'm seeing on both sides, mainly even on the right. Like I've seen Governor Greg Abbott say, like, there's no room for anti-Semitism and stuff. And that, pretty much he's sending officers there to arrest people for hate speech. And so people are getting upset over it, but it's like a pigeonhole to pit us against each other, because the reality of it is actually what you said. It's not about what they're saying, it's what they're doing, and how
Correct.
they're blocking people from going into the classrooms, intimidation, um, again, like freedom of association is gone when they're doing that stuff. And it goes beyond their freedom of speech. But you have leaders right now saying there's no room for hate speech. But then it gets into a little argument of what is hate speech. And
Mhm.
then people are starting to back, you know, these protesters. But in reality, It's what you said. It's how they're doing it, and they're not doing it correctly. So I
Yeah.
just wanted to
And,
put that out there because I even got caught up in that. I'm like, I obviously don't support Hamas at all, but you know, I feel for both sides on the Israeli and the Palestinian conflict. And so I was thinking that's why I brought up the question, and I'm glad that we're talking about this because people really need to understand that how they're going about their business is just incorrect. Just same with BLM when they were, rioting in the streets, right?
Mhm.
It's just not.
You mean the
That's not
mostly
the way to
peaceful
do it.
protest of 2020?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I remember those. I remember watching those kind of through the flames, all the mostly peaceful protest. It's a very interesting and important observation you bring up about, those there's no room for hate speech, anti Jewish hate
So,
speech, things like this. Um, and it's, of course, and you have two different things here. You have legalities, you have the Constitution, we're talking about the, freedom of speech, things like this. Um, and then you have morality. Now, look, I don't want any group being intimidated or threatened, or any individual, uh,
right,
for political reasons, whatever. I don't want any group being targeted because of their ethnicity, their race, their religion, whatever it is, or any individual for that matter. And this is where, um, but again, this is what the First Amendment is for. I want people to understand that when the founding fathers authored the First Amendment, it was the First Amendment, and in the Bill of Rights, it's what it is. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution. That's how important that they thought it was, that freedom of speech. They didn't author that. They didn't conceive of that amendment, that right, um, to protect speech that everybody agreed on. Hey, today,
right,
today is XY, date or whatever. The sky is blue, the grass is green. Yes, yes, I agree on that. You don't need you don't need a constitutional amendment to protect speech with which everyone agrees. You need it for contentious speech. You need it for speech that is going to politically or otherwise uh, um, attack people, make people uncomfortable. It's speech with which people disagree, sometimes in a mild form and sometimes in a very, very heated form. And so that's what it's there for. It's one of the reasons that I hate the term hate speech, because there are endless examples of hateful speech. We don't need to call it out separately. It's like hate crime. I don't like hate crime. Oh, someone killed you because they wanted your wallet. Someone killed you because of the color of your skin. You're dead either way. It's like,
right,
why don't we prosecute the behavior, the action, rather than someone's bias intentions? It doesn't, I don't understand this. So I do it in one way, but this, it starts dividing. Well, because you were killed because of your skin color, you were killed because of it was a gang war. You were killed because of a carjacking. You were killed because of a money deal gone wrong. But we're going to prosecute people differently based on these other elements. It's dangerous, and we've seen it. By the way, we've seen it now in the court systems when you have these different levels of prosecution and sentences with hate crime enhancements, and
it,
I'm not a
it
fan of it.
it's
So
almost like a tool just to kind of divide the people on their perspective about it. That's
completely,
how I kind of look at it. Because again,
it's
like you said,
another,
it's a,
yeah,
someone who's murdered was murdered, and there's a murderer. That's plain and simple.
simple as that.
And yeah, I agree 100% with you on
Yeah.
that.
So, getting into this article, and I have so many notes here, but want to get into this here with this particular caper at USC. So moving forward here, this is what USC says about canceling the commencement ceremony. Anthony coming up. Quote: With the new safety measures in place this year, the time needed to process a large number of guests coming to campus will increase substantially, unquote. USC said in its announcement, quote, as a result, we will not be able to host the main stage ceremony that traditionally brings 65,000 students, families, and friends to our campus all at the same time and during a short window from 8:30 to 10 a.m., unquote. But I was in public relations with the California Highway Patrol for a long time, really 6 years total, as an officer and a sergeant. And I knew BS when I heard it, and I always tried my best to avoid BS. I just tell people the truth as best I could. This is the largest, stinkiest pile of cow crap one could write. It's bogus. It is an untruth. It is a falsehood, what I just read to you, ladies and gentlemen, that the reason they're canceling this commencement ceremony is because there's 65,000 people coming. They have some new security protocols. Look, like I told you earlier, I worked across the street at Exposition Park. Now, Exposition Park is where the Coliseum is. It's where the USC Trojans play football, right across the street from the camp, literally across the street from USC campus. I dealt with the USC Department of Public Safety. I dealt with LAPD, obviously the California Highway Patrol, the LA County Sheriff's Department. Ladies and gentlemen, USC did not wake up 2 weeks ago and realize they had a commencement ceremony happening on May 10th. They didn't realize that. They've been planning this since last year. They plan everything in advance. They plan everything way in advance. Trust me, this is not a surprise. Their new security protocols are not the reason that they can't accommodate the 65,000 people that they've accommodated forever and ever and ever in the past. They've done this strictly for political reasons because they're afraid of the mess that they have caused. And that's what I want to talk about. And they're using this security protocol enhancement as an excuse to cancel this ceremony that was going to be emceed or was going to have the valedictorian Asna Tabasan. Now let's talk about her here in a minute. It says, we understand that this is disappointing. However, and this is a quote, we are adding many new activities and celebrations to make this commencement academically meaningful, memorable, and uniquely USC, including places with family, friends, faculty, and staff, the celebratory releasing of the doves, and performances by the Trojan Marching Band, USC said in a comment, unquote. Now, they said they're adding all kinds of new activities, right? Were just a couple of paragraphs, they said they have to cancel this one because of security protocols. But now at the last minute, they're adding stuff to make up for it with the new security protocols all over the campus. I can't stand people that are just being disingenuous. Why don't you just say what the facts are? That we made a mistake by allowing this person, this student, the valedictorian, to speak. And we made a mistake because of her positions about Israel, the statements that she's made. And I'm going to jump down this article real quick. Let me tell you what she said. Again, this is Asna Tabasan. Sorry if I got the pronunciation wrong. Yes, Tabasan. The complaints focused on a link on Tabasan's Instagram profile to a pro-Palestinian website that said, quote, Zionism is a racist, settler, colonialist ideology. And one Palestinian state would mean Palestinian liberation and the complete abolishment of the state of Israel. This is why they are canceling this, because they have undoubtedly received countless complaints. And this is me going on a limb here, not so much on a limb. I can guarantee you that they have received promises from very, very wealthy benefactors that if you let this person who is promoting the abolishment of Israel speak at my son or my daughter's graduation, you're not getting another red cent from me. This is what's happening, not by itself. That's not the only reason, but I'm telling you right now, they're getting calls from very powerful people with very deep pockets to say, you can say goodbye to my coin if you let this happen. Now, going back to what we said earlier, Anthony, this is the result. This is the result of USC, we see it, Columbia University, where they're sending Jewish students home for their safety. They're not letting them come to campus and have in-person classes. They're having a hybrid now, sending them home. By the way, where are the safe spaces for the Jews? Where are the safe spaces for the Jewish students? Safe spaces have been a big deal. I mean, if you misgender somebody, or if you propose a different political strategy, or you have a different political belief, or you have a different religious belief, or you may be pro-life. How many years have we been watching the videos of these students saying, we need safe spaces? I'm offended. I'm triggered. I'm triggered by this. Where are the safe spaces for the Jewish students who are threatened with violence and physical attacks? Same thing. Sorry. Where are the safe spaces? By the way, I don't want safe spaces. You know what I want? I want rule of law. We talk about this all the time. If you threaten somebody with physical violence, at least in the state I live in now, if you threaten them specifically, that is a violation of law. You should be arrested and charged with that. Where are the safe spaces for the Jewish students now who are threatened with violence? As a matter of fact, the universities themselves, at least Columbia and probably other ones, Columbia or New York, I think it's Columbia, maybe it's New York University, it doesn't matter, that these universities are in such fear of the safety for Jewish students, they're telling them to stay home. So do they need safe spaces? Well, no. You know what they need? They need rule of law. They need people that are making physical threats like this to be arrested and dealt with properly. So,
I like to add too, one thing I noticed, and there's actually a video backing this up, is if you notice all the protesters, there's something in common with them. Have you noticed that or no?
well, I heard a comment by somebody else the other day that it all looks like they smell bad. But what was the characteristic you find in common?
They're all wearing masks.
Oh,
All of
Anthony,
them, right? And you know what that
almost
tells
a
me?
person.
That tells me, that gives me my spidey senses go off. Hive mind. Why is that bad? They're operating at a low level where they can just start going nuts. We don't know. That's why we need rule of law. These people there, they're unhinged. You could just tell. And that's one thing that I will say that came good from the, the 2020 pandemic. We can just look at someone and go, oh yeah, okay, I know what you're about. I know. You see the protests over there? Yeah, you better stay away. Things are going to go awry for sure. And there's actually a video of, and again, I do blame the schools for this, because they indoctrinate people that are just there to learn. They have their brain open to learn, and then they use that to manipulate you to falling for these political ideologies. When I was in college just a few years ago, what did we do during commencement speeches? We talked about life, overcoming challenges. It's not political at all. It's all about motivation. It's motivational on how these people achieve these straight A's, or if they're in sports and doing their doctorate classes, all this stuff. Everybody, they talk about the challenges they overcame, not about Israel or Palestine or political things that are going on. And by the way, that they probably voted for these people that are in charge, right?
That's right.
And of course, they're not going to mention that. They're not going to mention the people that are actually responsible for it. They're just going to be throwing a fit and doing what they're doing right now. But there's actually a video of a young woman, and they interview her and go, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And they're like, "Oh, we're sticking up for Palestine. Columbia University needed us." And she had come from a different college. And they go, "Okay, what are you guys protesting about?" And she's like, I'm not sure.
Yes.
And then she asked the girl next to her.
Yeah, I saw the
you
video.
You've seen that, right?
I've seen it.
The other lady didn't know either. What's the reason that you're there? They don't even know. They're in a hive mind. And that's a dangerous thing without the rule of law. Because then you get, rioting and
You get
et cetera.
chaos.
Yes, you get chaos.
You get chaos, and then these people, again, they're people in leadership positions. They're not leaders, but these people
right.
who are in leadership positions, they find themselves like the gal at USC. They find themselves now so twisted like a pretzel. Oh, you know what? We're going to have this valedictorian
right.
who happened to say that she believes in the abolishment of Israel. Go ahead and speak at the commencement. And I think, Anthony, I was making notes while you're talking because you hit on a couple of important things. I hope I look down my notes and don't forget. But something else just came to mind in addition to that these people have become so isolated and insulated in their own echo chambers. And I'm talking about the USC president. I'm talking about you name it. They become so comfortable in this bubble of DEI and I said multiculturalism is it's at its passe now, but they become so isolated and insulated. They don't obviously they don't even understand the ramifications that a decision like this can have until they start getting the phone calls from outside, from people saying, "I'm going to stop donating," or Jewish students, and there were Jewish groups that also like formally protested this person speaking, and so then they start getting all this massive pushback, and so, oh my God, now what I do, rather than having the foresight to say, "Oh my God, you know what? This is a very, very controversial, whether you agree with it or not, it's a very, very controversial thing that she said, and maybe it would be better if we had someone that was going to be just more uh, um, neutral on these topics and talk about the future and where we're going to go as as graduates and things like this, like a traditional commencement speech." But again, they become desensitized to it because they've been immersed in it so much. So when you bring up that video that we both saw, why you're here, or whatever, you say, what are we protesting? And then that person doesn't know either. My wife and I were talking about um, a mutual acquaintance. I'll keep this very, very cryptic for obvious reasons, and a friend, and it's a friend of ours, but someone who we believe has went from kind of one, I won't say end of the political spectrum, but was more in line with the things that my wife and I believe, and found herself in a setting, educational world, education, and over the years has become very much the other way, has moved way down, way left on the political spectrum. Now, the funny thing is, when we have conversations with the person still shares our core values. Still, "Oh, well, you're right about that, blah, blah, but, I don't understand this and that." It's because I think this person has become, again, so insulated from alternative views that I think her ability to discern one way or the other has really diminished. I think it would happen to anybody. You and I find ourselves reading a lot of, detractors from our point of view all the time to prepare for shows and to help strengthen our positions, our argument. In other words, we're totally open to hearing opposing views. I thrive on hearing opposing views. I enjoy it. And so it's
Can I
just the
ask you a
opposite.
question about
You
her?
may. Yes.
I seen a actually, let me ask you first. What are the pros of her thinking that way and or voting that way or expressing those opinions of the core values and knowing that her politics don't align with it? What are the pros of that? Her being
Anthony,
in that position.
yeah, yeah. It's a great question. It
Zero, right?
because yeah, it's zero, but it's a great question to ponder. In other words, why do people why do people and this person um and her family, they live a very conservative lifestyle. Most people do. In other words, you engage in conservative values on the micro level. You go
Right.
to work, you don't hurt people, you abide by the law, you pay your bills, you don't threaten people, you take care of your children, you raise your kids, you join the PTA, you do the conservative things. In other words, I take care of myself. But in the macro, people will support entities and institutions that are completely at odds with those micro values, those specific family values, traditional values. And it's a great question. My only understanding of why that might be the case is often people will respond to certain things from an emotional point of view and not so much a logical point of view. They're thinking, well, I take care of my family, but or whatever it is. Or nowadays, well, I'm born with, a white person. I'm born with white privilege. They're being taught this. They're being told this because you have a skin color of this pigment, you have privilege over somebody else. So they say, okay, I have all these things because of my skin color or whatever. I'm fortunate, but so many other people aren't. So I'm going to vote for policies that give them financial support, that give them,
Right.
an
Or
edge in
virtuous.
getting into a college. Yes, I'm going to be virtuous through my voting, but in my personal life, I'm still going to do the same things that I think everybody should do. And so that's my only explanation. It's a fascinating philosophical question. But most people in this country, the vast majority in their daily personal lives actually engage in very conservative values for the most part. And so I think the same applies to the person that we were talking about, that I was talking about a second ago. And it just happens. But it's when you're in the world of academia today, for the most part, um, it's very difficult to to really engage in any meaningful way if you have any level of dissenting view. My
Right.
old
It's like the
it, Go ahead.
sorry, I was going to say it's they're operating out of fear because they know they'll get a lot of pushback from any sort of idea that doesn't go with the flow. And that goes down to the bare survivalistic ideas of, hey, if I say this thing, I'm going to get fired, and that means I don't get paid.
Mhm.
And so I think those are underlining things that they may not even want to admit. And I have to credit Robert F. Kennedy. I seen this, like a short video clip yesterday of him talking about that and how you can't convince somebody um, or persuade them a certain way if their salary is paying them to stay on that course. And that's the sad truth. You have these schools, um, again, perfect example of I'm questioning. They're canceling the commencement speech, right? However, they're putting on a marching band. They're doing all these parent and staff activities, but not the commencement speech, though.
Just the
Why?
one. Just
It's
the one.
because yeah, just that one thing, and it's because they got threatened, no more
Mhm.
coins in
Right.
their pockets.
That's
And
exactly right.
so, I mean, that's kind of like the base level, I think, is that these people are operating out of fear, and it's like it's multi-level, right?
Yes. That's
That's kind of
exactly
my
right.
2 cents on it
Well,
that I
you're right.
think.
And I put down that people are often it just they succumb to pressure.
Yeah.
They succumb to the weakness. I'm not going to fight this anymore, and um and I'm just going to go along to get along. And I think this
Mhm.
happens at every level. It happens at every level. And another thing you touched on before, talking about fellow students and just exchanging ideas. The whole the word college comes from collegial, meaning to interact and to be calm is what it means to have interaction on a um just a respectful calm level. That's what college comes from. And so it's another example of how how distorted the entire university, higher education, college education story has become. It's been distorted into something that people think is a platform for protests, and that's
Right.
no. Now, of course, we saw it in the 1960s. I saw it in the 1960s when I was 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. I remember watching this stuff. Didn't understand it, of course, but I remember seeing those things on the 3 channels we could get when I was a kid. And it was and this is what governor at the time, Reagan, was talking about in that opening clip that we showed, Anthony. It's like, "No, this is not gonna happen. This is not these are supposed to be centers of learning. Learning, not protest. If you wanna protest, you go someplace else and protest, that's no problem. Just like a
Right.
hospital is a place of healing,
Yeah.
not a place of protest. It's the same thing. It should be a very simple concept for anybody to absorb, I would think.
Like a
Um,
movie theater.
like
I
a
go
movie
there to
theater.
I go there to watch propaganda.
Yeah, yes,
No
yes.
protests there.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right. It's exactly right. Exactly right. And you know what? If you're all there to watch propaganda, you do it in silence, and that's no
Yeah.
problem too. That's no problem too. So I'm gonna wind it up with this, Anthony. Um, that first of all, this whole thing about we had to cancel it because of our enhanced security. Anybody just I implore people just read this article, and you can post the article, Anthony, the link to the website. Just read the article for yourself. And there's a lot more there, a lot more meat in it. But when someone has to say that, um, if you just say, listen, hey, I made a mistake. We made a mistake. And when we reevaluated, we thought this was not going to be the best thing for commencement ceremony. Okay, you made a mistake and we fixed the problem. So now we're going to have, this person, do the commencement. And by the way, you could bring in somebody neutral. You could bring in an elected official or bring in whatever and do it that way. But no, they had to make up a story that it is because of the enhanced security stuff. It is it's maddening to me. I'm angered by it. I'm angered by the total lack of leadership. It's all it is. So I will finish with this. If any of you have kids and they're approaching college age, I know you're getting ready for it. If you're junior in high school, whatever it is, I understand. But if you do, if you do live by traditional American values, if you believe in the Constitution, if you believe in the Declaration of Independence, if you do believe that we are a flawed but wonderful nation, if you believe that the the most likely way to a successful life is based on your individual behavior and not outside forces. If you believe that all Men and women are created equal in the eyes of God. Why in the world would you dip into your 401k and send your child to one of these anti-American, anti-God, anti-Western culture, America hating mills of indoctrination? Why would you do it? I don't understand. My kid's very young. We got a long ways to go before he's going to be heading to or be of that age. And then we'll have to evaluate that time. And there are, by the way, there are some wonderful institutions. Hillsdale College is one that we've talked about. There are some here in Florida, private entities now that are coming on board. So there is a little flicker of light out there. But outside of those extreme exceptions, the entire system is a debacle. It's an assault on individualism. It's an assault on self-determination, ladies and gentlemen. And it is a bastion of chaos. So I ask you again, why would you consider sending your child to some place that's probably going to turn them into someone who doesn't like you very much when they come home? So give it a second or third or 20th thought before you go through with it and look at other options. And but I do wish you all the best. I know that it's a tough time when you're trying to get your kid that higher education, especially if they're in the hard sciences like medicine or law or engineering. I understand that, but there are a lot of options out there, and we're already exploring them. Many years out, we're already exploring those options. So with that said, God bless America. Anthony Jackson, God bless you for being a great co-host and partner at Your Leo Nation. And we really, really thrive in your comments, ladies and gentlemen. Please subscribe to us on YouTube, a YouTube channel. Subscribe, hit the subscribe button. Follow us on all the social media platforms. Tell your friends about it. Help us get the word out and stay strong. Thanks, Anthony, again, and we will see you all next time.
Thank you. God bless.